What's that? Oh, things are going to be off. Let's just make sure that, there we go. I want to make sure the music isn't blowing everyone's head off. Audio was loud, now quiet. What about me, specifically? Yeah, no, me, I want me to be heard. I don't want the music to be heard too badly. It's because things have been changed around a bit, so I just have to make sure that everything's sorted out properly. But here we are. Hi, everything's fine. Don't panic. Audio is music. Okay. It was blowing our heads off in a good way. Well, at least we've got that, right? I've been a bit distracted, and part of the reason why I've been distracted and that I'm not diving right in is because I still have in a window off to my right the Disconcordia server. Is it time to panic, boys? There's been a lot of activity recently, and from a relatively small number of players, and that's not a complaint at the moment. I'm sure that there's going to be more people who will eventually join up, right? Like these things, we're deliberately starting it out small. But in case you have not heard, our most recent project has been to create a Discord server where people can roleplay using the setting that we kind of built on in one of our previous games that we played, Changeling the Streaming. And so far we've been quite pleased with it. But the reality of a game like this is going to be much, much more different than a game that you would find at your table, or even a game that you were playing online with somebody. A mass role-playing game like this is kind of like one part internet chat room, one part LARP. And it creates a lot of different Crosshair, what the fuck? A bit of a rump on him. We should see whether that's what Sophia would say or not. So we're going to start. I mean, like we're going to take your general Q&A today, right? Like it's a standard clinic hours, but because it's kind of nice to have something to start with, we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on here. Hey, Elenaria. RPG Clinic forever. Best content. Oh, thanks so much. You're awesome too. Dead ass. Yep, you still made it. Everybody's here. So first of all, what is a mass Discord game? We kind of touched on this the last time that I was on Clinic Hours, but to give you an idea, we've had players come in, create characters, get those characters sanctioned by a member of the storytelling team, and then play. And the play is freeform. It happens on a pseudo real-time clock. The reason why I say pseudo real-time is because text is never going to be as fast as somebody just acting it out, right? In a LARP situation. Some people can type as fast as they can speak, but most people can't. And people tend to think a little bit before they give their responses. They may be doing other things at the same time as playing, so responses may be a little longer between answers than what would normally be found in a conversation. But at the same time, it's considered that if you are in the server, you are active, you are playing, for as long as you are in there. And if you stop posting, your character is no longer present. I can type at about 5 words per minute, it feels sometimes. I mean, there are a few ways that you can test how fast you can type. One of my favorites lately is actually monkey type. So I've pasted that into the chat. It's an interesting way to sort of see not only how fast you type, but be able to practice so that you can get better at it. And it creates a situation whereby different people are online at different times of the day, whether it's because of your sleep schedule, your work schedule, the time zone that you live in. Not everybody, of course, lives in the Eastern Daylight Time Zone, which is where I am right now. It's just not something that everybody has. So you'll find that some people will be around early in the morning, and some people will be around late at night, where the game is located, which is in the Eastern Time Zone. So if you are online at 11 p.m. Eastern, no matter what time it is at your in your neck of the woods, it's going to be 11 p.m. in that game. 114 words per minute at 100%? Fuck. Damn. That is a significant amount of speed. Ellie actually does have a very good point, which is how fast I type and how fast I can type after realizing too late that it was a direct question and I have to go in a completely different direction are two very different things. That is entirely fair. I'm just still amazed at 114 words per minute at 100%. Now, is that one test or is that like over a consistent period of time? Because that is, even if it is just one test, that's very impressive. I clicked the link and did the thing. I'd do the thing now, but I'm not going to because I'm live. And this keyboard, if I pound on it, I think the microphone will pick it up. Hey, it's the it's Pukajutsu riding hard alongside his Stampede. Hello, everyone. I hope that you are enjoying Life is Strange True Colors. Yeah, pound it. That was, from what I saw from it, it looks like a really cool game, so I'm really happy. And I think that, Pook, you were playing with the Twitch extensions that basically meant that the crowd could vote on everything, which was pretty cool. But the interesting thing is that this game was something that we had to... Oh, we've got a train going, do we? Damn. You'll have a limited time to earn exclusive emotes. Well, there you go. So it was fun. Oh, good. I'm really pleased because that's a game that I have a lot of respect for Don't Nod. I have friends who work at Don't Nod, and they make some awesome stuff. So glad to see that happening there. Thank you for the bits and for the subs from everybody. That hype train is super cool. So where was I? Right. In creating a mass game, which is kind of like, again, one part LARP, one part internet chat room, there are certain design elements that we have to take into account. The first and foremost is that you have very little control over the kinds of players you're going to get into the game itself. And thank you, Dio. It's kind of you. In a tabletop game, I can control who plays. I have a very limited number of spaces at a table, and so I can sort of control it, alongside everybody else who's playing as well, right? Everybody has their own inputs onto who gets to sit down, and if your group is small enough, then essentially everybody's okay with everybody else, and that's fine. In a large game, like a LARP, or in this case, a Discord game, people who join up can't really be vetted as easily. I can absolutely tell people that they can't play because I know that they won't fit in with the rest of the game, but it's very hard for me to be able to do that right off the bat if I don't know them already. So the game has to be designed around accommodating many different player types, with the acknowledgement that the game is not necessarily going to be for everybody. If you are somebody who role plays strictly to play with mechanics and all you want to do is knock down bad guys, take their stuff, and move on, then this kind of game isn't for you, because it's really more of a social game, what some people call a parlor game. It's an opportunity for people to kind of interact with each other in character. And while we do have mechanics built, and at some point in the future, I'm sure that Kate will be able to show off what she did in order to create a bot that lives in our Discord server that basically allows 99% of what you would ever want to do in a Changeling game and keep track of things automatically, like your resources and the like. And Raccoon says, I think Disconcordia has been lucky thus far. We have been lucky, but I also know that we're sort of curated in that we haven't done much of any mention of this outside of our community. So it's only community members who have kind of gone into the server and started playing. We haven't encouraged outside people to come in and check us out, which we will probably do in the future. Just at the moment, we're kind of trying to step into things smoothly and establish a world before we start opening it up too much. And of course, making sure that the design sort of fits. We are in doing social things, we wanted to make sure that those who really enjoy mechanics would have the opportunity to play with those mechanics, which is why everybody has a character sheet and why we have the bot that has dice rolling built into it. But we also, and resource tracking and, the various different kinds of permutations of bot stuff that's there. But we also wanted to make sure that we accommodated people who were interested in story as well. I do have experience in these sorts of mass games, but this is an experiment that I wanted to take on with the rest of the storytelling team in an attempt to make sure that we were trying to encourage a style of play that was more based around storytelling and social interaction without bogging down everybody in the kind of minutia that you'll sometimes find when running a game in terms of logistics. The sanctioning process is relatively quick and straightforward. We do not require large amounts of text to be written by players to justify elements of their character sheet or experience expenditures. We, in fact, insist on backstories being limited because we don't want to read huge reams of pages of backstory. We're cheering Pukajutsu. Why are we cheering Pukajutsu? We like Pukajutsu, but why are we cheering? Why? But we also wanted to make sure that we were creating a game that was safe for everybody, which is why we integrated our safety tools into the game itself. Every player is asked about their lines and veils during the sanction process. If those lines and veils are incompatible with the kind of game that we're trying to run, players would be encouraged to perhaps find something else to play. We also have our play, pause, stop card system built into the server itself through the use of emoji, but also through the use of bot commands. People can use pause and stop cards to get highlighted by the bot. A stop card alerts storytellers so that they can come in if needed to help out. Thank you for that hype train. I got an emote that involves a dog, and that's always a good thing. So Requiem says, I'm impressed you got all of that functionality in just one bot. Other games I've seen need 3+ bots to do everything you did with one. Granted, I don't think those games have such a skilled programmer in their ranks. I imagine that most games just don't have programmers. They find other bots. And we did actually investigate other bots, and we found some decent bots, but we didn't find a bot that did what we wanted. I had a list of design criteria that I wanted, and Kate picked up those design criteria and ran with it. There were elements that I wanted to make sure of. I wanted to make sure that we were tracking experience for players, but that we were only handing out experience to players if they were playing. But I didn't want them to gain experience for every line that they sent, because I didn't want to reward people who wrote, 100 lines of text over people who would write 10 lines of text. I didn't want to give experience based on whether or not you posted a lot, but I also wanted to make sure that I didn't want to give that experience to players if they didn't play at all on a certain day. So there's a lot of different things that I wanted in the game. I wanted it so that if somebody did flash a safety card, that people would be notified so that we'd be able to come in if needed. I wanted the ability for players to have regeneration rates for their health, their glamour, which is in Changeling. It's a resource that you can spend in order to basically use magical effects, for banality and all that. I wanted to be able to not only track their resources, but also give them back manually, but also automatically. Because if there's one thing that I learned in terms of my experience managing these online games, it's that the logistics end up being really rough on the storytelling team if they don't get ahead of it. It becomes your day. If you say that you're going to devote 2 hours a day to making sure that the game is running smoothly, all you end up doing for those 2 hours are processing the backlog of stuff that players need from you. And then you don't get a chance to roleplay yourself. You're essentially a bookkeeper. And for a volunteer position, that sucks. If I was getting paid to do it, that'd be something else entirely. But that is a problem. So the bot, through a lot of work put in by Kate and through designs that we discussed, we created a bot that we really wanted to make sure helped storytellers and helped players be independent of each other. Because the other thing is that if you are a volunteer storyteller and all you're doing is essentially doing the sheet bookkeeping for everybody, you aren't in fact going to be engaged in a whole lot of story. You're doing something selfless in order to make sure that other people can have fun, but you yourself are basically just doing work. So the bot takes the place of that, and enables both teams, players and storytellers, to enjoy themselves while they play. We created a Discord server, and in that Discord server, we also made sure that players could have access to private channels to discuss with storytellers, that they didn't have access to all in-character channels until they were sanctioned, so that people can't interfere with play unless they have our go-ahead. Even different places in play, although this hasn't happened yet, as the world expands and as we get more players in, we may open up new locations, and those new locations will be limited to certain players potentially until somebody is invited or somebody has a reason to go there, so we can control where people come and go. Discord makes that actually relatively easy, which is quite nice. But we also wanted to make sure that we created a universe in which we had enough rooms that people could be private if they needed to, but that we didn't have so many that it became difficult for people to convene and play in one location. So we found that there's a few places on our Discord server where players tend to gather, and then they splinter off if need be. My private channel is great. You have been invited to the Dreaming channel. Exactly, Crosshair. If somebody enters into the Dreaming, then we might allow them access to a channel that is devoted to the Dreaming itself. But we don't normally want to let somebody wander into the Dreaming without a storyteller being present, so we limit access to it unless somebody has a reason to go there right away. These sorts of games involve a lot of trust between players and storytellers, because we're not there 24/7, and we also don't necessarily want to control every aspect of your character while they're away. Players are encouraged to come up with what's happening to their characters in downtime when they're not actively chatting. And yet at the same time, we also have to trust that players aren't going to take the story and run with it in a way that we lose control. So you can't have a player come in and say, okay, so I'm going to play this particular character. That sounds like a good idea. But I'm going to have this character, fight off 7 bad guys and get shot 9 times and stumble into a hotel, patch themselves up by sewing themselves up with sutures that they got from the front desk, and then stumble into the freehold later on and tell everybody about their heroic achievements, because that's not fair. So we have a certain amount of trust that we have to have with our players, that during downtime they can continue their own stories but without breaking the game. And so far we've had that no problem at all. It means that we have to be vigilant and we have to catch things right away. If a player starts veering in that direction, before we start, stealing all their toys, we have to find out, contact them privately, and just make sure that they know that there are certain things that we can expect and that we desire during downtime. And players tend to be quite receptive to this if you get them early enough, because also if it ends up being something where they say, well, that's not the kind of game that I want to play, then no problem. At least they haven't invested so much into the game that it'll be hard for them to leave. The worst thing is to give players toys and then take those toys away. You do not want to do that at any time. So it helps. One of the best parts about running these sorts of games, though, is that the players create their own fun. The conversations between player characters, take on a new meaning when they're not sitting at a table forced to be a part of a group. People do have to introduce themselves to each other. They do have to learn and dance around each other's characters somewhat. And like a LARP, and I saw this in the server today, sometimes you'll get a scene where somebody will come in and then 8 people kind of are like, I have to type my introduction. And then that person just says, I have to type my introduction to everybody else. And then it just becomes a big circle of hello, hi, hello, hey, what's up? And that can sometimes get a bit awkward. But then it kind of smooths on into the rest of play. Players can also sort of assume things, right? Like they tend to introduce themselves to NPCs, but you can also assume that you know an NPC, or at least know of an NPC, to sort of move on. So it helps. It helps for that as well. But so far I've been really pleased with how it goes. And if you've been enjoying the game, I encourage you to tell other people who you think might be interested in playing. There is a requirement, unfortunately, to play this game, which is that you do have to be somewhat familiar with Changeling. And when I say somewhat familiar, I don't mean that you have to have played it before, but I do mean that you have to have access to the rules, the setting. Basically, you have to have access to the Changeling 20th Anniversary Edition core, and you have to have read at least enough of it to get a basic idea of what's going on and how to create a character and what the rules of the game are. Which can be quite a bit of reading for somebody who's brand new to it. And that's understandable. But of course, we can't, do private tutorials for every player coming in to teach them what's going on. Plus, the people at Onyx Path who put out the book kind of deserve to get some sales off of it. It's not a large investment for what can be a very rewarding time to play. If you can imagine how much you would spend on a particular video game and how many hours of pleasure that video game might give you, role-playing is kind of the same way. For an initial investment of a book, the PDF is not that expensive on DriveThruRPG, then you can get hundreds or thousands of hours of enjoyment out of it. So that is handy. Requiem mentions it's also fun to be able to be in character without near everything being about an overarching plot. And that is part of the advantage here, right? We're also making sure that any kind of plot that we're introducing at the moment they're low key, right? We've been adding certain hints of, here are some things that might be going on in the city. Here are some things that might be interesting for people to pay attention to, but nothing that's so over-present that it has to overtake everybody's play for weeks on end. Because we want people to have the chance that if they just want to tune in and chill out and talk, then that's what they get to do. That's what they get to enjoy. So it helps for that way as well. Crosshair says, to be fair, the requirement to play is not that bad outside the owning of the rules. Even with knowledge from the stream, I kind of got acquainted in an afternoon and during character creation. A lot of these things you can pick up as you go along. and there's only a certain kind of percentage of the book that you need to have really read before you can kind of dive right in and know what you're doing to go for it. So there is that to pay attention to as well. If there's one element that I didn't anticipate when we started, it would be how much certain players would get invested in minutia. I know that players tend to like to engage with systems and rules and mechanics, and if it's on a character sheet, that's there. But we have a lot of players who are relatively new to the game and who became very concerned about certain elements of the character sheet or about the rules that I could not accurately kind of just say, you don't have to worry about this. It's not a big deal. It's not going to come up in the context of game. This is not something that you need to put a lot of focus on. I got this from a surprising number of players. I'd say half of the players that have been in the server have found at least one thing in the game which I'm not going to say fixate. Like, nobody's done anything wrong, but it was an issue of me being able to communicate, like, your antithesis is a part of your character, sure, but it is not going to come up in game almost ever. You're not going to have to worry about it that much. Or somebody worrying about whether they could come from one area in the world or another. I don't care. The only thing that we really did when we were vetting people's backstories was make sure that somebody didn't come out with something that's so outlandish that it wouldn't fit in with the rest of the game. But I think that some of this is also a little bit of people being a bit gun shy, of other games being very restrictive on what people play. And I want to make this clear. That's okay. You're going to need, some games will absolutely want to have a heavy hand in mechanics and stuff. And that's fine. That's totally fine. If this will only come up if another player triggers it, well, it may come up in the future, Requiem. But the point is that it probably won't. And if it does come up in the future and it turns out that somebody didn't make the correct choice, we're not going to be hard asses about it, and we'll be able to make changes if we need to. I'm not invested in creating an arena where players are competing against each other, or for either the best character or the best mechanics or even the best story. We've built into the game that if your character gets too powerful, we will write them out. So this is known. Everybody knows this when they join the game. No problem, Pook. Absolutely no problem. Oh, you got hate bots, huh? Fuck. Ah, damn it. I'm sorry about that. Where was I? I was like, whoop. You're able to shut it down for anyone's done anything. Oh, thank goodness. Okay. I'm glad. Glad to hear that. Hey, thanks for the follow. That's appreciated. So yeah, the idea of a restrictive game is kind of important for some people because they really want to engage with those mechanics hard. They really want to have more of a tabletop experience and less of a social experience. They have the crew for it. They have the support for it. And that's great. Those games are amazing, but that's not the kind of game that I want to play. And I'm hoping that it's the kind of game that people won't want to play if they're coming in to play with us. So there is that. I mean, I do enjoy ponies riding, right? Gotta have ponies. The situation with Twitch is it's not great. The Crosshair mentions, besides asking about, hey, did I step over a line here? The only thing that I sometimes worry about is if I go in now with my red cap and start, as I say, effing things up, will it be an issue with others, especially if there's something going on? But, big but, it's also part of, we're here for the fun of everyone, so thinking I shouldn't bother this scene is okay. I have seen players hesitate to join in, and 99% of the time, join in. Honestly, just come in, play, do what you want to do. If I notice that a player only ever shows up to mess up other people's scenes, that will become clear in time. But part of the joy of playing in these sorts of things is that you might have a really in-depth conversation between two characters, and then somebody else comes in and makes a total mess of things, and that's part of the story, and it can actually make the story better for all three players. Because also, if a conversation truly needed to be private and nobody really wanted to be interrupted, you could request for a private room, and we would make one for you then at that point. R.I.P. Nathan. Oh dear. And so far we haven't had anybody cross any lines at all, which I'm really pleased about. We do have those safety tools in place, like we've mentioned. It's in everybody's profile that you can access. You can ask the bot for a player's profile and it'll come up with a description of their character, but it'll also come up with their lines and veils if they've chosen to put them in there. And that really helps. Hey, Angelwick. Thanks for that Prime sub. Bezos gives you a Prime sub if you sign up for Amazon Prime. Might as well use it, and if you use it here, it is very appreciated. We've also had some like right now, today, I saw some of the best stuff that I saw. Like there's some really interesting stuff happening, and it's getting to the point where I'm getting quite excited about the prospects of what's going on here. But I also realize that when I come in, I have been hesitating. And I've been hesitating for a specific reason, and I'm not sure that this reason's good. So I'm kind of curious if anybody has any input in this. But for the first couple of weeks of this server's existence and for it being open to play, I've been dealing with a lot of back-end stuff, character sheets, rules answering, private messages, that sort of thing. But I haven't been playing a ton in character, and the reason why is because I want players to learn and handle themselves that a lot of the game is going to have to come from them. I didn't want to create a scenario where people wouldn't think, oh, if a storyteller isn't present playing an NPC, I shouldn't be playing right now. Or I'm going to wait until John or Kate or Scott or whatever shows up. Didn't want that. It is a difficult thing. I've been doing a lot of back-end stuff. It is difficult, and because sometimes like I really do want to play, but other times if I'm also dealing with a lot of like rules adjusting and stuff like that, then I sometimes don't want to be playing at that moment because I want to be focused. But also I definitely do want to make sure that players get into that habit of creating their own fun. And so far that seems to have worked. Although I do notice that occasionally when I bring in NPCs now, people get overly interested because of course they have more knowledge of the world than players do, because the world is something that were created by the storytellers of this game. It's totally fine though, Kung Fu Fenris, if you aren't playing all the time. I think that this is the kind of game that if you show up once every so often, great. If you show up once a month, that's fine. If you show up every day, more power to you. Obviously, I want people to be in the server. I want it to have a population for people to notice it and be like, oh, there's someone here, I can play. And if I thought it was easy, I would give bonuses to people who come in and start playing after, a long period of silence, just to give that kind of like thank you for at least posting and making sure that people know that somebody's around. I see you when it happens, and I notice. We have some players who are very good at idling in rooms waiting for other players to show up, and that's fantastic, and that's something that I really, really do appreciate. But I don't think that people have to be in all the time, and I also really don't want people to feel pressured to, if you haven't played enough, then maybe this game isn't for you. There are going to be times where someone isn't going to be able to play at all for a long period of time for no other reason other than life gets in the way, and that's completely fine. So that's okay. I'm really good at playing with myself. That is fair. it is sometimes interesting to see if that I introduce an NPC who is part of the original Changing the Streaming, which I've done twice now, seeing people in chat sort of light up about that, and that's an interesting moment for me. But it's fun to see. But some of the new NPCs that are in and around are fun. Currently, some of my favorite moments in that game are actually the dumbwaiter and the parrots. But those are purely there for flavor, and yet at the same time, people seem to engage really well with them. So, being a sometimes food is also good at times. Absolutely, Kung Fu Fenris. Absolutely. They feel like family coming home. Well, family. So Requiem mentioned something, and I'm going to bring it up. No blue book you have to fill out every week to stay part of the server. Is it odd that I find that a blessing? That is intentional. Because I'll tell you a secret about blue books, which is not a secret at all. They suck for everyone. Blue books are what a lot of online role-playing servers would do to keep track of things. Players would have to mark down what had happened to their character either in the game itself or even during downtime. And they'd have to write these out and post them in order to earn experience or to be able to spend their experience, or in some extreme cases, to be considered a part of the gaming community at all. Now, there's a few problems with this. First, it feels like work for some people. Some people love writing stuff down about their characters, and others do not. And so forcing this on them is just basically making them do homework, and that's not fun. The second is that somebody has to read them, and it's not fun for that person. And finally, not everybody is the sort of person who wants to write this kind of prose or is even good at it. And while writing is a good way to get better at writing, you shouldn't have to if you don't want to. And I didn't get into storytelling so that I could read the minutia of every character's life. So we did away with it. It's not important. The fact that you can spend your experience on whatever you want is just fine. I'm not that worried. If I notice that somebody is min-maxing their character, there are absolutely ways for me to mitigate that. I have other people on the storytelling team who will also be able to see that, realize it, recognize it, and deal with it. And again, if somebody gets too powerful for the server, we're going to retire the character. We've made it clear right from the start. And we may, if we need to, do a complete venue reset if we have to. I'm not saying that that's going to happen. I don't think that we're going to be looking at a venue reset. We're only 2 weeks in. Like, how much experience can somebody have? But the issue of blue books in order to help control your population speaks to me of why do I need to create so much control? If the server is of a size that I am comfortable with, that's all that I care about, is people having fun. If there were 1,000 players, we would probably need to establish some more control, because every player has a chance of coming in with either too competitive a mindset or to troll a mindset. And I don't mean trolls like changing trolls, I mean more like internet trolls. But the problem ends up being that the more players you have, the more likely you're going to get somebody who needs a bit more constraint. But since our population is small, and I don't anticipate our population is going to get all that huge, then we're safe. I think that there's definitely room for quite a few more players, but I don't see us kind of growing to the point where we're going to have 1,000 simultaneous logged in at once. Competitive and changeling, it happens. The idea, the competition that kind of comes up is less I am better than you, and more if something happens in the game, if there's a storyline that involves a skill set, my character has that skill set and can deal with it faster or better than others. So you might as well just have me do everything so that I can be the hero. This is often done with combat, but it can also take place with other elements of the game as well. And it tends to happen when somebody just has so much experience that they can buy everything. Werewolf and Vampire are actually two games where this becomes more of a problem. In Werewolf, you have something called rank, where everybody is involved in rank. It's not like, am I part of the nobility or not? But it's the level of powers that you get is controlled by your rank, and people want to rank up. But the problem is that if there's a threat out there and you have a bunch of people who are rank 4 and you have a bunch of people who are rank 1, it can be very easy for those who are rank 4, who have been in the game for a long time, spent a lot of experience, to run out, deal with a threat, come back, and then get the credit for dealing with that threat. Thus, they can continue to advance in rank. Whereas the ones who are rank 1 don't get to. So they don't get to advance as quickly, and they feel, perhaps rightfully so, like they're being blocked from play. So it's a problem. Yeah, Renowned Fission in the Vampire position shuffle. Absolutely. So that helps, right? It is, but Changeling doesn't have those mechanics as much. There is title that you can earn, but the thing is, title isn't something that you have to have. Title is something that people can ignore. Title is something that can hurt you at the same time. Like, it isn't, it's a thing to strive for, but it isn't the thing. So it's less of an issue with Changeling than it is for other games. So Pook has said that I've had a couple more people express interest, but they're not familiar with Changeling the streaming. Not that I'm pushing it as a prereq, but kind of waiting before shouting from the mountaintops about game over here. At this point now, people, I think that we're at the point where if players want to spread word of mouth, they can. You do not need to know Changeling the streaming to play this game. There are going to be people who will inevitably be like, I know these characters and I like these characters and I want to see what happens with them and I like this universe and I want the chance to talk to Hergo. But you don't have to. And you don't need that to enjoy the game. And you definitely don't need to watch to get the full experience. You can if you want a little bit of enrichment. Not required at all. Nobody knows. Hergo's name has not made it into the channel yet. Nobody has specifically identified Hergo because nobody's spoken to somebody who knows Hergo. So there is that to take into account. Elenaria mentions it's a feeling to be able to interact with, even in my case, just knowing I might interact with in the future, the Changeling the streaming NPCs or PCs. It's, I mean, fan art is one thing. That's fan interacting and being able to do it not as me, but as a character. Fantastic. I can fan gush out of character and find things out again for the first time as a character. And that's something that we're, you know, I like that idea as well. We made sure that the quote unquote main NPC cast were new characters. Starcloth is a new freehold. It's a new arena for players to play in. And the reason for that design is because otherwise knowing Changeling the streaming ends up becoming much more of a requirement. It still wouldn't necessarily be anyone can justify, hey, I'm new in town. I haven't been to this freehold before. So it's true that I don't know any of these NPCs and I can learn organically as I go. And a lot of players handle that well, but a lot of players will also feel like it's a requirement. Oh man, everyone else knows these characters and now I have to too. So how do I find out about them? You mean I have to watch 400 hours worth of streaming to get the whole story? Fuck that. And then they don't. That's not going to happen here. These added NPCs are showing up occasionally to create that outside world, and they may become more common as time goes on. But the reality is that you can show up at Starcloth and you have the same amount of knowledge as everyone else at the start of the game. You are not at a disadvantage because it's new for everyone. So these other characters being around and being present, that's cool. And I do think that that's going to happen more often, and I think that it's a great bonus for people who are fans of Changeling the streaming. But we are trying to make sure to bring that emphasis forward. It is not a requirement for the game. Therefore, you do not have to know that in order to participate. Oh, Spline said their name was Hergo? Oh, okay. So then Spline did. My mistake. I remember now. Yeah, Spline mentioned it because she had heard of Hergo, but hadn't met Hergo before. Yeah, it's a new well of glamour which has been drawing Cathane consciously or not. Yeah, absolutely. The thing is that changelings also kind of can sense where they should go, right? Kenning is a thing. So it helps. yeah. So that's kind of like where we're starting basically with this, and the ideas going forward into it is to see where we go and see what players can enjoy. There's been some great stuff that I've seen that's been entirely player introduced, but we also get a chance to sort of have fun ourselves as we come in and interact on a storyteller level and as an NPC level. But the other and crucial element of design that we had to do in terms of world building, not just in creating a new freehold, but creating that freehold's inhabitants and this freehold's quirks, some of which have already been discovered. The dumbwaiter that can never get anything quite right, the parrots who guard the wrath in the freehold's basement are two examples of things that I'm very pleased with how they've come forward, especially that the dumbwaiter is something that everybody interacts with. If I'm around, I'll give the answers as to what the dumbwaiter gives, but everybody has started to just come up with their own ideas of how the dumbwaiter screws people up, and that's one of my favorite things that I've seen so far, is seeing that kind of creativity come out from everybody. So that helps. Requiem, what you're describing is a very common thing. I think the hardest thing I am still wrapping my head around is the difference between your character's mortal looks and their Cathane look. Although I think that's fairly minor. Thing is, in this game, your mortal look almost never matters because you are in a freehold. Only your Cathane look is going to make a difference. Your chimerical appearance and voile are what people are going to be interacting with, not your mortal self. So you kind of don't need to worry about it. You can just sort of ignore it. The game itself actually takes a very hand-wavy approach to it, and that's sort of deliberate. And while it is sometimes a little difficult for people who are especially like literal-minded to wrap their heads around, it's intended to say you are a human, you are a changeling. These things are both true. You are 6 feet tall. You are also 9 feet tall. These are both true. And if you're walking through a door, the point is, yes, if the door is only, 6 feet 5 inches tall, and yet you're a troll, the idea is that if you walk through the door, your troll self will crouch to go through the door, and your self won't. And that's just the way it is. It's very hand-wavy, but it used to be more complicated than that in earlier editions of Changeling, to the detriment of the game. And I kind of appreciate that now it's just, yeah, they both exist. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Solo role-playing with a dumbwaiter is helpful for positioning a character for play. Absolutely, Ellie Spot. Absolutely. It is one of those kind of like, I have to wrap my head around it things for Changeling. Is the difference of real versus chimerical reality. But thankfully for this game, it doesn't actually end up coming into play all that often, so we just don't have to worry about it. I wonder what the captions say for chimerical. Chimerical. It's not quite what chimerical is, but whatever. Chimera? So it knows chimera, but chimerical it does not. It comes out chemical or miracle or whatever. Yeah. I suppose beggars can't be choosers along that way. I mean, hell, we have the captions. I'm just glad that we do. And I hope that people who are using them don't mind that they are not perfect. They are automatic, but we do what we can. Make sure that I stay hydrated before Ash comes in and kicks my ass. So, are there questions that people have? Any comments about the server itself, or questions about where we're going with it, or what can be done right now? Any questions about role-playing in general that people want to come up? This is just a general session at this point, general Q&A. Didn't have tons prepared for this because honestly, it's been a while since I've done clinic hours. Actually, I think it was 3 weeks ago that I did my last one because Scott did one and we didn't have one last week because of a random thing. So hello from a lovely little French place. Did 8 hours of driving. Yeah, that's a significant amount of drive. I've done that before. It's not fun. It is It is not fun, but I'm glad that you're there safe. And I hope that your lovely little French place is everything you could hope for. But yeah, don't worry about staying up. If you need to sleep is there. It is all there for you. Crosshair has a question, because Crosshair always has questions. They're great questions. Is it possible to schedule storyteller involvement? For example, I know Mina will be called into the principal's office. Would that require a setup? You can ask. In your private channel, you can make a mention of, hey, there's something that I want to do. If possible. The only thing that I can say is at the moment, we can't necessarily guarantee times. We're around and trying to make sure that we can establish the game and be there for when people need us. But we also have our own stuff, right? Like I work a full-time job. So I'm able to sometimes be around during breaks at work, like during lunchtime or whatever. I'm able to be around after work, but like if I have a stream going, I can't be there. And I can't only devote my life to either work or RPGClinic related stuff, and that's it. You know, like there are other things that I do need to do, you know, like groceries. So I can't necessarily guarantee any specific time, but it is definitely worth saying, hey, so I want to get this out of the way. Do you happen to be around? Or if you notice that a storyteller is present and you want to talk to their NPCs, you can mention it. Just don't be insulted if we have to say no. For instance, if you mention, I want to meet the freeholder, and I know that I only have 10 minutes before I have to leave, I may not be able to accommodate the request. But if you say, hey, I'd like to meet the freeholder, and I was like, oh, well, I was planning on coming in anyway, sure, we can do that, then absolutely. But it kind of has to be initiated by you. We can't memorize all of our players' schedules, so that has to be on you to find out. Requiem asks, out of curiosity, I know it depends heavily on level of storyteller involvement and such, but on a persistent world like this, what would you say is an ideal ratio of storyteller to player? Logistics of stuff like this always interests me. It very much depends. If I'm running a scene, if it's a scene where I'm specifically like, okay, I have an objective that I want players to reach, they're focused on a goal, we're going to do this. Like, let's say I say, okay, well, this Saturday at 3 p.m., people can join in and we're going to go out chimera hunting. I generally want no more than 5 or 6. And 6 is pushing it. Combat takes a while in any role-playing game, but remember that every player that you add adds to the complexity, not just because you're adding to the complexity because it's one more person acting and around, but you also have to up the difficulty the more people are involved. If you have an idea like, I want this to be a relatively dangerous encounter, a relatively dangerous encounter for somebody alone is going to be a lot different than somebody who has 7 of their friends backing them up. So the ratio there tends to be no more than 1 to 5 if I'm hopeful. I know that in a lot of cases that actually goes up. But also, one of the things that we may have to introduce is the idea of focused play. So focused play would be that if you are in a scene where I say, okay, we're running combat, at that point, we're also going to have to be like, if you are in this scene and you are running combat, you must be present for it and you have to be ready. You can't multitask and do other things and then come back and only check every like 5 or 6 minutes, which doesn't seem very long. And for conversational roleplay, it's not that bad. But for combat, if I have to wait 5 or 6 minutes for every person to answer and I have 6 people running it, then that means 1 round of combat takes 30 minutes. And that's not even including the back and forth that needs to be done. So it's actually more like an hour for 1 round of combat. And that gets very old very fast. So focused play ends up being that if your character isn't present, if you are not able to answer regularly, then your character kind of drops from the combat automatically, or the scene. I'm not saying you have to like type really fast or whatever. Obviously it's fine if it takes you a moment to think about what you want to do and write. But like if we have to wait 10 minutes every time for you to even notice that something's going on, then that's not sustainable. So yeah, it's a sometimes food, but it's something that I've been considering kind of inducting as like an official term. Like, okay, this scene is now focused play. If you are present, we assume that you are present all the time. If you are not present, you may remove yourself from the scene, and that includes storytellers. If I'm trying to play and multitask at the same time, I might mention, hey, I'm multitasking right now. So I may not be able to answer quickly. So in that case, players kind of understand that they might not want to only focus on my character. They may want to focus on other characters in the room because I'm not all that available. But if like a fight broke out and I was just sort of like, yeah, I'm still multitasking. Every once in a while I'm checking in, then clearly I shouldn't be there. Or I should pull myself out of character, and then stay out of character just to help adjudicate things. So, now, in terms of an ideal ratio of storyteller to player overall for the server, that's a lot harder to answer. And it's less about, I don't actually know, based on the ideas of this server, because we're trying to go for a server that has less direct storyteller intervention and less requirements from players to deal with storytellers. So I don't actually have a great answer for you. My one major concern that I have right now, and it's a concern that I can't really deal with perfectly at the moment, is that our storytellers are located in the same location. We're all in the same time zone, and our schedules don't differ so much that we're covered 24 hours a day. Now, thankfully, we're covered for quite a bit, and that's a good thing. But like, for instance, when it's 3 a.m. here, probably no storytellers are going to be online. But that might be the perfect time for somebody who's just getting off work in Perth, Australia, to play. And then they may not have storyteller interaction at that point, and that can be frustrating. The issue, though, is one of my own pride. And I'm saying this even though I'm probably doing myself a disservice by saying this, but I'm not at the part where I want to start looking into getting additional storytellers in, because I also know how I want to play, and I know that the other storytellers on the team, I know how they play. We've played together quite a bit, and it makes it easy for us. And the instant that you add storytellers from outside the group, it becomes exponentially more difficult, and at the moment, I don't have the time to devote to the server when it's difficult. So, look, I love Australians, okay? I love Kiwis, I love Aussies, I love, anywhere around the world, right? They tend to speak English, so they're more likely to show up here than from certain countries. But honestly, I love seeing people from anywhere. But I also recognize that it's a little harder for us to, be at ideal times around the world. Similar to our streams, right? I mean, we stream from 6 to 9 on Sundays in the evening. And for our European friends, that may not be sustainable at all, just because that's, that could mean midnight to 3 a.m. And not everybody can stay up until 3 a.m. And then, maybe the following day you have work. So we know. And Kate is correct. We've discussed narrators or some other such title for folks who are approved to make rules adjudications in our absence. Right now, we don't have to worry about that because we don't have a whole ton of rule adjudication coming up. But we'll see. The idea of additional storytellers, if the game starts getting outside of our control, becomes more of an idea. The other thing is that if the game starts growing to a certain exponential number, then we may need to ask for support in other ways as well. So we'll find out. Things like there may be Discord features that we'll need to start accessing that will cost money, in which case we may start needing donations. At the moment, thankfully, there aren't. If we get too big and we want to start doing things like professionally publishing things with like a proper graphics artist to take our player's guide and make it all fancy and stuff, because we now have 4,000 players, that costs money. There are things that we'd have to look into, but at the moment our costs are very low, so we don't have to worry. But our emotional cost is something that has to be taken into account as well. The amount of work that Kate put into the bot is immense. The amount of work that I put into to create the player's guide and to help design the world itself is also quite a bit. Like all of these things take time and effort. Liz and Scott have been busy. I'm not putting any blame on them. Also I'm not volunteering other people to do work, but they've come in with NPCs and that's fantastic. But like, I can't ask them to do more. We all have stuff that we got to do. So if we keep this relatively easy, it makes it more interesting for us to play. What we don't want is for us to think about Disconcordia and then say, well, I guess I better do this because I have to. Because the instant that it becomes a chore, I don't want to do it. And if I don't want to do it, then why does it exist? And that's kind of what I ran into with other mass games. Again, not saying that other mass online games are bad, but like that's part of the reason why I couldn't get into them, because it wasn't fun for me to do so much bookkeeping. It wasn't fun for me to just wrangle players all day. So hopefully we're not going to get to that point, but we'll see. We will see. Elenaria mentions, I really appreciate the way storytellers and players don't hesitate to say something came up or I'm invested, I just can't type all the time, and are so often careful to say thanks for the role play. It feels very genuine and something that adds to it all, and people haven't gone super off topic or out of character, only as much as necessary, etc. It's really nice, really, really nice. There's something about Discord. There's a few things about Discord that I've absolutely adored about this game, which I'll get into right after I rehydrate. That's good stuff. The fact that we can have an out of character channel at the same time as in character channels is incredibly refreshing, because it means that people can interact on two levels without interrupting the play. You don't have to wade through everybody's out of character snarking all the time if you don't want to. There's an out of character channel for that. People can discuss stuff in there. So that having that parallel is great. A lot of the old chats didn't have that capability at all. You'd only have one room, or you were only, when logged in, you could only be in one room at a time. Now, a lot of this was important because you wanted to make sure that somebody wasn't trying to negotiate multiple scenes at the same time, because that's generally bad. But thank you for the cheer for the hydrates. That's awesome. But we have that here. The other thing is that Discord has emojis, and these emojis are out of character ways to react to what's going on in game, which I really enjoy. I like the fact that people can put a laughing emoji underneath something that a player has said that's really funny without necessarily kind of wondering, is it a character who's laughing or not? All emojis are essentially out of character, and that's a great way to interact with the game. Because I think that sometimes if you come off with a really cool moment or really funny joke or whatever, being able to slap that emoji in there to be like, good on you, good job, is actually really fulfilling for a lot of players. Especially players who might be a little shyer or a little newer. To get that kind of encouragement is great. And it feels good to be appreciated and acknowledged. So Discord actually makes that a lot easier, which I really like. I love the fact that you can click on somebody's name, and because we've assigned roles to people, you can see their character's pronouns, their player's pronouns, their character's kith, the house that they might be a part of. It's all there. It's like a rapid way to find out about somebody's character right away. The bot is there in order to find out other people's profiles if you need to. And above all, it's actually made me personally feel great about the system that we've kind of been developing with the play, pause, and stop cards, because they've all been used at this point, every one of them. And they have been used to great effect. The green card, I never, even though I knew that it was a good idea, I never realized just how important that green card is, especially in the context of an online game, precisely because, as some people have been mentioning, it is so good to know that somebody is having a good time when you can't see their face, if you can only see their text. It's incredibly freeing for me, because then I have, like, for instance, there's swearing in the channel, right? It's the channel is like the whole server is marked as not safe for work. Part of that is legal reasons, and part of that is because that's the kind of game that we're playing, where it's a game that people can be crass and rude or lewd or whatever. And the fact that sometimes somebody is asking like, oh, like, is swearing okay? But then I see people flash green cards and I'm like, fantastic. People are actively promoting the kind of game they want to play. And that is shaping the community in such a way that it means less oversight on our end, which is amazing. And as Kate has just said, honestly, the fact that I don't have to feel like I have to go back and read every bit of roleplay to make sure folks are playing nicely is huge already. And that's completely true. I don't feel like I have to read everything. I often go back and read stuff because I'm interested, but I don't feel like I have to. And that's amazing to me as well, because if somebody uses a yellow or a red card, or sorry, if somebody specifically uses a red card, storytellers are pinged, and the bot actually makes it so that then I know which message is there, and I can immediately go back to where it was called and find out what was going on. And so far, the only person who has pulled a red card in that server is me. And I pulled that red card and we got the situation sorted to the point where, like, we not only do we move past it, I think that everybody ended up happier than before I pulled the card in the first place. Yellow cards have been used specifically about something that I was doing as a storyteller. And I was incredibly happy to see that, because it meant, oh, well, I didn't anticipate that this was going to be something to worry about, but you've said, hey, this is something that I need to bring to your attention. And it meant that I could make the game better by listening to that sort of thing. And there weren't hard feelings, hopefully. I mean, I can't speak for everybody else, people who've used these, but the fact that these cards are being used means already that this is my favorite place to play online than any other place that I've played, because of these safety tools that are built in. And it means that roleplay can continue and go hard. I wouldn't want to flirt with anybody online anymore if I didn't have safety cards around, because I wouldn't want somebody to be like, oh, I'm uncomfortable. Because also my name is attached to every post that I make, right? There are players out there who will not want to be flirted with in character because they have difficulty drawing that boundary between their character and their real selves. And I would want to know. But now I can, because we've given people tools specifically to say, like, yo, maybe not me, maybe not today, maybe not right now, or hey, not me, not now, not ever until I say it's okay. And that just frees the roleplay up. Knowing that these tools are in place means that I don't actually have to worry as much about the player base. And that goes a far way to make sure that the server's a fun time for this. Yes. Kate mentioning, folks ask if they can eavesdrop out of character, and it's so cute and sweet and amazing. Like, yes, mechanically you can, but consent sparks joy. It does. Look, the biggest lesson that I can ask anybody to take away from using safety tools or asking about consent and stuff like that is that you get to do things safely, and therefore you get to do things that you want to do. Because if I was the kind of person who wanted to, like, describe horrific, gory circumstances in a game, I'm not. But if I was, I wouldn't want to do it if everybody else wasn't on board. So knowing that somebody can say no or yes, the yes is just as good as the no. It's just as important. And that's what the green card is. So just fantastic. I love it. Yeah, that's the point of the bot stuff channel, Pook. That's very much what you want to do. Being able to pull up a player's bio and seeing their personal lines and veils is also so relieving, because I know right away where I can and cannot go in a roleplay. I want to stress something. It isn't a requirement that you check everybody's lines and veils every single time that you encounter them. It is possible that someone's lines and veils may change, right? You can change your profile anytime you like. And I also don't expect everybody to know everybody's, but it's good to put it in there because if you're looking and then you notice it, you can act on it. And players have the tools that they need if their lines or veils are being crossed. I will point out though that at least during character creation and sanctioning, everybody's asked about their lines and veils. And I have made sure, and I'm not saying, like, look, other storytellers can sanction as well. I think I'm the only one who is sanctioned at this point in time. But I would tell somebody if I thought that their lines and veils were stuff that was just not going to be useful for the game itself. But that hasn't happened yet. It hasn't come up. So we're pleased about that. But if it does, then it's too bad. But I'd rather somebody know right away, hey, this might not be the game for you, than not. So yeah, there are also 20 plus characters and counting. At somewhat, you're going to forget somebody's line or veil, which is why the pause and stop tools are great. So the crosshair, the issue with adding things to your notes in Discord. So first of all, your Discord notes are only visible to you. If you change the part of your Discord profile, what they call, here it's called, let me just see here. Where is it? So in your in your About Me, that is in every single Discord server. So if you put your lines and veils in there, no matter where you are, your people are going to be able to see it. So we want to make sure that the people know that. It's, for instance, like my pronouns are in my my About Me that people can access and see. But I also don't necessarily want to require people to put things in there because it would be Discord wide. It also is worth it to point out that we change people's nicknames in the server to reflect their character names. And then we put your like online handle after your character name so that people know both the character and the player, but that's only for that server. If I change your nickname there, it doesn't reflect anywhere else. Yeah, it ain't my first rodeo, Requiem. I do make sure that I try to ask the right questions. I try to give everybody an appropriate amount of attention during sanctioning because it is important. Sanctioning is kind of one part making sure the math works out, one part making sure that you're appropriate for the game, and one part making sure that the game is appropriate for you. So notes are only for you to you. Yeah. And if you make a note about somebody, I believe that note shows up whenever you encounter that person on Discord. But I'm not certain about that. But yeah, any notes that you make is just on your end. So if you want to put notes about other players or about other characters on Discord, you totally can. And don't worry, no one can see them. Even storytellers can't see them. Yeah. So it might be a handy thing for you to do if you don't use the notes already for something else. To use the notes in Discord to keep track of something that you might have going on with another character. There's one reminder that I'm going to have, and that's patience for us. If you post something and we say, okay, yep, that's something, we'll talk about it later, we may not remember. Remember that there's a ton of players, so it's possible that you might have to poke us more than once about something. As long as you're not just hammering us every single time you see us, that's fine. But just be patient with us. If there is something that you're asking about and we can't get to you right away, we may miss it, in which case you might have to mention it again. You absolutely can use it to note who you've met in character, completely. I also want to urge people that it's okay to do a little bit of shorthand. Things like my character greets everybody with a wave or a smile as appropriate when they enter the room is totally fine to say. You can even say my character gives a personal greeting to each person as they enter the room. That's also fine. Sometimes it's a lot of fun to play out every little bit of an interaction, including the sort of like the social niceties and the initial interaction. But sometimes it's okay to just blitz through it, or especially if you're leaving, like my character gets up, waves goodbye to everybody, and grabs his stuff and leaves. Like, you can do that. You don't have to say, oh, hello, you, I am very sorry I have to go. To you, I'm very sorry I have to go. You can shorthand your way through things. It's fine. If you are explaining a concept to another character, you can write out everything that they're saying word for word, but you can also say, I don't know, as an example, Spline sits down with Zoe and explains the various different parts of the freehold and what each of the rooms are called. Instead of saying, Spline sits Zoe down. So we have the foyer, and we have the black box, and we have the main stage, and we have the... You can do that if you feel like you want to get to the good stuff. It is totally appropriate to do that. And it also sometimes kind of avoids that awkwardness of, okay, I've entered a room with 6 other people in it. Well, now I have to deal with 6 hellos and then 6 hellos back before we get back to the other thing there. So Requiem Lost asks, any highlights during these first 2 weeks of play that I've seen in character? Do I want to get into that? As much as I think it's important to highlight play when people have done well, I also don't want to make people feel like I'm calling them out, or specifically I've missed your scene, because a lot of role playing has happened that I haven't directly interacted with, and there is also some role playing that has happened where I haven't read it. I haven't been able to read every single scene word for word. So there are things that I've missed, but there's some things that I have seen that I really like, and I'll point some out. First off, I have to applaud the Crosshair for playing a character who isn't afraid of being contrary. And that's an issue that I think that people can realize, is that sometimes you get to a point where you want to be liked. And so you play a character who, is polite to everybody and nice and being like, oh, well, I'm not like the other X. And that's also totally fine if you want to do that. But sometimes you want to get into a game where there is drama. There is a certain amount of shaking things up. And I'm not saying that the Crosshair is the only person who has done this as a player, but it is nice sometimes to see somebody come in and not be afraid to not go with the flow, to cause a little bit of discord on Discord. So that's really handy. I've noticed that there are players out there who have been really good at idling, of going into a room, making it clear that they're ready for role play if other people are up for it, but then waiting for somebody else to show up. And that is a huge thing, because somebody has to break the ice. Somebody's got to start. And while you can post in the out of character channel and say, hey, so I'm ready to go, if you're ready to go too, that would be great. That isn't necessarily the best way to do it. The best way is to actually go in character. And people can see the play is happening and then they can go after it. I have seen some wonderful interactions between nobility and non-nobility. I have seen some hints at people forging connections between characters that aren't pre-built. Not that pre-built is bad. I love the fact that some people are like, yep, my character and this character already know each other. We live together. We're part of the same motley or whatever. Like, that's great. But it's sometimes gratifying to see 2 people who were initially strangers end up as something not strangers. That's handy. I have been especially pleased at the level of play that I've been seeing from Puka. I have said before that Puka can be one of the hardest kith to play, if not the hardest kith to play, because of the nature of how to speak as them can be difficult for some players to wrap their heads around. And even if you can speak like a Puka, there's a difference between speaking like a Puka and then speaking like a Puka artfully. And so far, people have been doing a magnificent job at it. So I'm very pleased about that. When I say it's the hardest, I'm not saying that like other Kith are here and Puka are up here, but I would say that if other Kith are here, Puka are here, right? They're just a little bit harder. It's kind of like She can be a little harder because then they have to layer on nobility and houses and stuff like that. It's just one little extra thing that you got to pay attention to. And of course, Puka and She are the two most popular Kith in general when it comes to games. So but like it's really nice to see that that coming through. And it's I've also been really impressed with players coming in and doing things, not coming in and saying hi and then just waiting. And again, if that's where you're at that particular day, that's not a problem. I'm not coming down on you for doing that. But I do have to give a shout out to people who come in and they have a thing that they want to do. Maybe it's a crafting project. Ellie Spot's been doing that quite a bit, which has been great. Maybe it's I am going to go pour myself a drink at the bar up here. I am going to go for a swim in the underground gardens pond. I am going to, and having an action that you're ready to take, having a project that you're willing to pull other people into. These are things that can really help draw out the roleplay from other people. And it's kind of warms my heart to see players encourage other players, because that's kind of another thing that makes me feel good about I don't have to be here 24/7 because I know that the server's in good hands. There's a pond in the underground garden, Kung Fu Fenris, and some people have taken to swimming in it, such as Avatar of Cain, who I have seen swimming in it. So it's it is. There are a lot of things that I see that I really am liking so far from players. And the thing that I think I like the most is that I haven't really seen anything that I've looked at and been like, that's not good. That's too bad. So it's fine. People don't have to worry. I've seen people make use of the grace period. The idea that you can change elements of your sheet because they don't quite work for you in the first few weeks of play. Every time I get a request like that, I'm glad, because it means that somebody gives a shit. Somebody giving a shit is way better to me than somebody who looks at their character, says, I made a mistake, and they shrug, and then they don't do anything. That's disappointing to me, because I would rather that somebody feels good about their character as opposed to somebody who feels crappy about their character and they don't feel like they can do anything about it. That grace period is there for you. So I'm just really pleased that people are taking advantage of it, because they deserve to. They deserve to know. Goodbye, Rock Pants. Enjoy your work. Hopefully you'll find more surprises there that you'll get to enjoy. Yeah, that grace period is really helpful for a lot of players, and I appreciate people using it and taking advantage of it. It is handy. So thank you for that. Thank you, everyone. Let's see if there are were there any questions that I missed that somebody might need to throw in here? By the way, if you have, I realize I'm saying this just as somebody posted, if you have logged into the server and you haven't created a character yet, or if you haven't logged into the server and you're thinking about playing, totally cool. There's time. You can play when you're ready. You can also, thanks, Krister. That's appreciated. You can also, by the way, you can request what we call observer status. If you want to see how other people are playing, you can log into the server, ask for observer status, and then you'll be given the ability to see a couple of the in-character rooms where you can watch people play. You won't be able to post yourself. You'll be able to post in the out-of-character channel but you won't be able to post in those channels. Just if you want a moment to sort of be like, oh, this is what's going on. Now I more understand what the dealio. So that's an option that people have. Requiem says that I really appreciate that I have yet to be in a scene where someone forces their way to the center of attention. I feel everyone has a voice and everyone respects that voice. It's nice too. Nobody is kind of just doing the point at me, pay attention to me thing. Sometimes it feels that way when I enter, but I think I'm trying not to do that on purpose. I think that's just because people see an NPC and they naturally get interested. Do you guys want to know some stats? Let's see if we can pull out some stats. While I'm waiting for other questions to come up. Let me see what I've got in here. Let's see now. So, of the characters that we have, if we're going to sort, the kith that is the most present in the game are she. We have 6 she, 3 Arcadian, 3 Autumn. The next is actually Satyr. And then after that, we have a good mixtures of Boggans, Cluricon, Puka, and Selkie. We do have a Slua. We got an Ishu. And although I'm not sure if the Ishu... Oh, the Ishu isn't sanctioned yet. The sheet's there, but we haven't sanctioned the sheet for play yet. So we do have a good mix. Definitely looking forward to seeing some of the other kith represented. But so far, we don't have anything that I'm like, well, we have to put a lockdown on this. We have too many of one kith. What are we missing? Well, that I can answer for you. Give me 2 seconds here. Let me just pull this up. So for listing the kith, we are currently missing. We do not have any knockers. We have... No, we do have one of those. That's fine. We have no knockers. We have no trolls. Knockers and trolls are the 2 kith that we currently have that are not represented. Which, to be honest, is pretty good. All things considered. Like there are 13 different kith and we have 11 of them represented. That's great. Well, 10 and a half. Issue, we have an issue on the way, but isn't quite in there just yet. So we're looking at those are the ones that are missing there. In terms of nobles, we have almost an even mix of non-noble and noble characters. Interesting for a commoner freehold, but not something that I consider a problem. We also have a pretty even mix of court. I'm being deliberately vague on some of these because not necessarily everybody wants like their court allegiance to be known. But we have a pretty even mix of courts, pretty even mix of noble versus commoner. It's pretty cool so far, and that's without any manipulation on our part. We haven't actually made any changes to the way that we would encourage or discourage people from picking certain choices in the game itself. We do have a system for that, which we call rarity. We can make certain cut types rare, in which case you have to purchase using bonus dots. or freebie points, I should say. You have to purchase the right to choose something with freebie points, or we can make something encouraged, at which point then we give you extra freebie points if you pick that particular thing. But so far we haven't felt the need to make any changes along those lines. In terms of seemings, we have representation from all of them. The majority of players are playing Wilders, and I think that's fine, to be honest. Wilders are kind of like the default character type because they're the adventurers. They go out and do stuff. So I'm actually totally fine with Wilders being more common. But we do have Grumps and we do have Childlings. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, we don't currently we don't want to force anybody to make any specific choices about their characters just yet. I would say that if there's anything that we're at risk of, it's that if we say we get out of, let's say once we get 30 characters in, if half of those characters are she, which at the moment, I mean, like everybody from now until 30 would have to pick she, I would start becoming a little more concerned, because I do think that there is value in making sure that there is a diversity of kith represented. But I wouldn't necessarily worry about that so far. So she are the most common right now, but not so common that I feel like we have to start putting a cap on that just yet. Court, I mentioned Requiem. Court is pretty evenly divided. If I sort by that, yeah, Court is pretty evenly divided. Specifically among active play, I think it's kind of 50-50. Which is really cool. In terms of houses, well, that I can also tell you. In terms of houses, the house which is most represented, there is not one that is more represented. We have a tie. Danan and Fiona both have 2. We have 2 Elened, but one of them is not currently sanctioned yet. And we have Aeson, Beaumain, Dairian, and Leonon, and Scan. Or Ska, I should say, not Scan. Ska. Yep, there are 2 Danan. 2 Danan. So, yeah, that's an interesting stat to throw out there. But otherwise, yeah, I don't know if there's any other specifics that people are curious about. But because we actually have a list of all the characters. We have an index that we have here that we can also use to take notes if we need to write anything down that we have learned about a certain character or a player. Apologies if this isn't the player's guide, but how is buying backgrounds going to work? So that's actually not in the player's guide. That might be something we should put in the player's guide. But what I can tell you is that some backgrounds you can't just buy. For instance, if you want to buy more title, you have to earn it in game. You have to find somebody who's willing to give you a title, and that might not be easy if you didn't start with it. If you want to end up purchasing other backgrounds, then we can talk about it, because the game actually doesn't give you the option to buy them using experience points. If I remember correctly, I have it here. Let me just make sure that I'm not completely talking out of my ass. Yep, at the moment there are no ways to buy backgrounds. So Kung Fu Fenders, you're not being promoted out of the game if you get a point of title. The possibility is there for characters to ascend past the limits established at character creation. So if you're a knight and you desire to become a baron or a baroness, or even higher, the possibility is there. But it will be extremely difficult, to put it another way, because there's going to be two elements that we need specifically for title. The first is that your character will have to earn it, but then also you as a player are going to have to earn it. And the reason why I say that you as a player have to earn it is because if you, for instance, become a baron, and that you also are a baron who has lands and therefore owns like a freehold or whatever, then we're not going to give you a freehold unless we trust you as a player to be able to do something cool with it. Note how I didn't say we trust you as a player to do something constructive with it, just cool, right? Like we want it to feel like if we're giving you more power in the game, that you earned it both in character and also that we can trust you out of character to use it in a way that makes the game better. So the idea of buying other backgrounds, though, like if you want to have a dreamer, if you want to increase your resources, if you want to, these are things that basically start taking actions of that, like that in game, and have that reflected. And if it's not something that you can really do in game itself, mention it to storytellers. And this might be an example of, we're not going to ask you to blue book stuff. We're not going to ask you to write write me 2,000 words about why you deserve to have a dreamer. But you might need to post in your private forum like, hey, so I'm interested in getting a dreamer on my character sheet. And then we can kind of discuss whether that's a possibility and then what it will cost. We'll probably come up with either an experience point cost if we think that it's appropriate, or we may just give you the background if you feel that you've earned it. So for instance, if you say, I want to start putting my resources to work for me, I want to buy an extra dot in resources. My character has been getting a job, to working extra hours, and I've been making smart investments and not spending away money frivolously. Though you might be like, sure, fine, here, have a third dot of resources. It's going to cost you 3 experience points. Congratulations. It's done. But we might also say in the middle of an adventure, hey, you found a sword. That sword you might just put on your sheet without you having to spend experience because you were on an adventure and you earned it. So it's going to kind of be like a nebulous concept there. But if you're interested in buying a background, just mention it. We'll deal with it. But that's a really good question and something that we should probably discuss. It's not something that we have kind of discussed internally yet, because I think that there are backgrounds that people should be able to buy if they want. But there are also backgrounds that people won't be able to buy. You won't be able to buy remembrance. You can mention that you might want it, but we're not going to let you just buy it. Some backgrounds are literally things that you're born with, and that's it. Let's see. Ellie asks, if we want to purchase new arts, do we have to find a teacher in game? I'm going to say no. If you find a teacher in game, that's going to make it so that I'm more likely to want to allow you to buy dots in an art in more rapid succession. So say, if you say, hey, I want to buy the first dot of naming, we can assume that you can do your own research so that you can learn how to do the first dot of naming. And we can also assume then all the way up that you can potentially do your research for naming 5. But if you're like, hey, I've noticed that you've bought naming 1, then naming 2, then naming 3 the instant that you had the right amount of experience for it. If you had a teacher, if you could find a teacher in character and do that, I'd be more inclined to say like, sure, that's justified. But if I see that you're just buying naming 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like right in a row with nothing else in between, I might be like, this is very fast for you to become an expert in naming without a teacher that I can like see in character. So I might ask you to like find one. But in general, no. If you want to buy an art, you can just buy it. Certain arts, naming might be a bad example for this because naming is kind of one of those rarer arts. Some arts are very easy for you to pick up. Some arts might need a little bit more. Like for instance, if you're buying Infusion, you might need a teacher for that because it's just a rare art because it was mostly only used by knockers until recently. But in general, no, you're not going to need a teacher. You just have to ask. We'll let you know if a teacher is required. But in general, no. I'm also like, look, if you say, hey, so my character has recently been visiting other freeholds looking for a teacher for that, we might be like, sure. I don't want to stop people from playing the characters they want to play. So in general, yeah, I'm just going to let you do it. It's not worth the time or effort to worry about balance. We'll just go by our gut. Here's a cue for you. What is the stance on retiring a character and starting a new one via player choice? More importantly, the limitations on how often it occurs. I'm assuming folks can't just spin a new character on a weekly basis. So, if you want to play a new character, there are two things that we take into account. The first is your character's removal in the service of the story? And the second is, why are you asking for a new character? I'll start with the second. Why are you asking for a new character? If you're like, I don't feel like playing this character anymore and I want to play a new one, that's fine. We'll work on it. We may, if I'm in a position where I'm like, I've sanctioned 50 characters in the past week and I'm tired, you may not get priority for sanctioning because you already have a character. But if you're just like, nope, I think I want to play a new character, in general, that's fine. You'll just have to go through the sanctioning process again. The reason why I would ask, why do you want to play a new character, is because I also would say that if you are retiring a character, you cannot switch back. You can't play a new character, decide that you liked your old character better, and then go back to your old character. It's a risk that you take for playing a new one. And the reason we have that is because otherwise you will have people who will shop characters around to find out which one they prefer, and that puts a lot of stress on storytellers to sort of, and also the rest of the player base. Like, who are you playing today? Who is this again? Oh wait, this character is back. I thought this character left forever. Well, then what happened to the other character? It unbalances the foundation of the game and makes it so the characters don't feel like they have the right amount of permanence in a game. So if, for instance, you have made 4 characters in 4 weeks, at that point, we're probably going to tell you no. You need to start focusing on at least giving this character a shot. But in general, if you want to play a new character, you can. We're not going to force you to stop. The other thing that you can do is that in your grace period, you can change your character. We've had at least one character change their kith straight up. Just rewrote quite a bit of the concept. And that was completely fine. We just made sure that people were made aware of it. We threw up a pause card and said, hey, just so that you know, this character is no longer X. Now this character is Y. And it just worked out and everybody just rolled with it, because honestly, it doesn't really, it's not that big a deal to make that adjustment in your head. But if your reasoning for playing a new character is legitimate, like, hey, this character has done some bad things and now nobody trusts this character, and I don't feel like I can do anything with this character. It's not fun for me anymore. I'd like to play another one. That's a good reason. But the reason we ask is because if you play 4 characters in a row who is just like, yeah, I got kicked out of Fae Society because I was an asshole, then I might be like, the problem isn't your character. You can still totally play a knocker. Hey, Captain Silvertongue. You can still totally play a knocker if you want instead of a red cap crosshair. That's totally fine. You're still in your grace period. The other reason why I ask is the character's removal in the service of the story. If a character dies in a context of the game, or if the character is removed because the storyteller asked you to, because your character has become too powerful, or if your character leaves the game because it's like part of an adventure, your character makes a big sacrifice, or your character, as part of your character tries to initiate a coup in the city and fails and is banished. If it created a story that players enjoyed, you then, at your next character, may get to do things with that character that other players aren't normally allowed to do. You may be allowed to buy restricted character traits. In this case, right now, it's merits and flaws that are all restricted. But you might get the chance to specifically do something that other people don't normally have the chance to do. And the reason that we lock that behind that is because we want people to feel good about getting their characters into a situation that, if it's in the service of the game, that they might lose their character, but at least everyone ends up with a better story for it. And then you get to do something cool with it afterwards. note that just dying because you like jumped off a building is not going to, it's not in the service of a story. Getting into a duel with somebody and getting in over your head is not necessarily in the service of the story. But like I said, engineering a coup that fails, that's something that a lot of people can get involved with, and that can be something that's really engaging for the rest of the team. So we make that call. Yeah, you were joking about the redoing everything but the name. I get it. Silver Tongue, I get it. Sorry, I missed that out on the last bit. So that's an example. There may also be a situation where another kind of character opens up that we wouldn't have considered in the first place. Some of that is going to depend on how much we trust you as a player and what your situation was as a character. I'll also point this out. If somebody gets a restricted option, that doesn't mean that everyone can take it. If somebody gets a restricted option, that doesn't mean that even somebody who earns a restricted option will be able to take the same one. And we might reject a restricted option for one character and okay it for another. Sometimes it's just, hey, that's when you were making your character, that's where the game was. And sometimes it could be like, I couldn't trust you to play a vampire, but I could trust this person to play a vampire because I've known this person for 20 years and I know precisely what they were going to do with that character, and their character concept made sense in the context of the game, so they could play a vampire. By the way, you're probably not going to get to play a vampire. Don't worry about that. But it is not necessarily saying we don't trust you. It might be we just trust this player's concept more because of the moment that it was presented to us. Also, some people I've known for quite some time, from the very beginning of RPGClinic a year ago. It could be somebody who came in right at the start of us role-playing 5-6 years ago. It could be somebody who I knew before we even started streaming on Twitch. All of these things make a difference. Plus, if you have a penchant for a character who is disruptive, and at the moment we don't want an overly disruptive character, that might be the case. So Kung Fu Fenris, let me see if there's any other questions that I'm there. You're talking about cocaine in the green room? Well done. That's what Fiona does. Let's see. Okay, Requiem Lost has a question up there, and then we have a question from Kung Fu Fenris. All right, Requiem. When a character becomes too strong and you as a storyteller feels it's time to retire that character, I think the player guide mentioned that a storyteller would discuss an end for that character's playable story. Do you have an idea what that might look like, or is it still a work in progress because of how far off that might be? It can be any number of things, and it really depends on the character. If your character is kind of the quiet type who doesn't get involved in a whole lot of adventuring, they might live longer in the game because they don't actually unbalance it that much. But it could be, hey, we're going to engineer your character's death. It could be your character is going to get promoted and is going to become a baron, but a baron in, I don't know, the Kingdom of Apples. And so therefore they're no longer here in Cross the Shadows. So you are asked to, so your character moves away and doesn't come back. It could be your character is engaged in enough political strife that they have to lay low for a while, which is effectively ending the game because they won't be able to come back for years. There's a lot of different ways for this to come about. So it's dependent on the character's story arc. It really does make a difference what kind of character you are. But the point is that if we've asked you to retire your character, we'll come to a decision together. We're not going to unilaterally walk up and be like, your character's dead. Now, if your character dies in the course of the story anyway, then hooray, like that's fine. But the thing that we won't do is we won't make a unilateral decision about your character unless for some reason you force us to. But I don't see that happening with any of our players. You've all been great. We will force it if, for instance, you're like, I refuse to play anything else other than this character and I'll play this character forever. Then we might say, okay, but then the character is being removed from play. Sorry. And that's okay. That's totally fine. Kung Fu Fenders asks about Fey Death. So here's the thing. Fey Death has a very specific game term, which I think you corrected yourself on. There are 3 ways that a changeling can die. There is mortal death, there is chimerical death, and then there is Fey Death. Fey Death is actually the worst of all of them. That's you die by cold iron. Your soul is irrevocably destroyed. That's if you die by cold iron, that's the way you go. You cannot be resurrected. You leave play. There are some ways in which your character might become a wraith, but we're not going to do that. We're not going to start having people play wraiths. There is real death. If your mortal body dies, your character is dead. You cannot be revived from real death because your mortal shell is gone. Your Fey self, like the Fey part of your soul, will go on to recrystallize somewhere else. But we're probably not going to let you recrystallize yourself. You'll have to play a new character. And the reason for that is that in general, mind, we don't like to have players play characters that are related to each other, because then it's sort of like, it's a little harder for you to just let go of your character. It's kind of like, well, I died, but I get to keep my story going, which we don't want. But the other thing that we don't necessarily want to do is have somebody cheat death, which I've seen before. Somebody who will be like, okay, well, I'll play my brother who's out for revenge for who killed his brother. And I'm like, well, now basically what you're doing is you're like, you died, but you want to still kill the person who killed you. And now you have an excuse because you're playing your own brother. Like it gets complicated and honestly not fun. Yeah. Eric the Cleric died. Here's Derek the Cleric. I want players to also experience new things. Now, if you have an idea that's really kind of like removed and there's only a tangential relationship, we can talk about it, right? Like I'm not saying that this is an absolute rule, but in general, you can't be related to your previous character. Or your previous character's story in that way, and that's to prevent revenge characters. But yeah, if you're killed mortally, your character's done for. I'll point out that also, if you are an Arcadian She, we don't know what happens to your Fey soul. Big shrug. My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my previous character. Prepare to die. Perfect. Perfect, Kraggles. Perfect. That's going up on the screen because it deserves to be up on the screen. So that is one thing that we have to take into account. Now, chimerical death is another matter entirely. If you are chimerically killed, you can come back because chimerical death isn't permanent. If you are re-enchanted, your character basically wakes up as a mortal with vague memories and flashes of what it was like to be a changeling, but they'll probably just look around and be like, I was having a delusion of some sorts, and probably not tell anybody because they don't want to look like they're delusional in front of everyone else. But if you are re-enchanted, then you are basically brought back and everything's fine. We had chimerical death in Changeling the Streaming, so I imagine we'll probably see some chimerical death in Disconcordia as well. Now, if your character is chimerically killed and you're like, I want to use this as an excuse to stop playing, that's okay. We can engineer it so that your character essentially escapes Fey society that way. That's okay. So we can figure that out, but chimerical death is not the end. Now, that being said, if you are chimerically killed, this is still considered a big deal. It is still a crime. The way to keep it in mind, for instance, is when a changeling is wounded chimerically, their wounds tend to be they tend to be larger than life, right? Like if you are, it says so in the book, right? Like if you are cut, instead of it being like like you might get a big dramatic slash across your face. You might have like a part of your hair sheared off. You might have, but then, you heal and then it just goes away. It just looks larger than life because that's how stories represent wounds. But it is still a big deal. It still feels awful to be killed. And there is always the chance that if you are chimerically killed, that you will not be able to come back. So while killing somebody chimerically is seen as less of a crime than killing somebody's mortal body, it is still very much a big deal to kill somebody. So don't just randomly like kill somebody chimerically in game and then be like, what? It's no big deal. He'll just come back. Like you'll be seen as a murderer, even though the person might be able to come back later on. Won't be quite the same as being seen as a murderer in mortal society, but there you go. I'll also point out that if you ever wield cold iron against anybody, that is a really big deal. It's a really big crime. And if you carry cold iron, just know that you are making a decision and you may be crossing a line that you will not be able to get back from. Let's see if there's any other questions here. We're coming close to time, but... So a tangential could be, like my current character saw my old character kick some monster ass and it inspired them. Maybe, like that would be about a limit that I would probably be okay with, but I would just be careful because I also don't want your new character to come in and just talk about how awesome your old character was, because that's also kind of weird. So there's that. Yeah, there's a Dougal antenna who may come find you if you use cold iron. So that's something else that I'll point about the design of the game. If you want to do bad things, I want you to do bad things. I want you to get in trouble. I want you to do things that shake things up. If that's what you want to do. If that's what your character wants to do. But we also do have some safety gaps, right? As much as a lot of the NPCs who you may have met during Changeling the Streaming are either retired or busy with other things, we're not necessarily going to go against if your character goes on a cold iron murder spree and we feel like we want to put a stop to it because it's starting to affect the game, then, one of our NPCs might just come up and like bonk you on the head. It is possible. Don't forget, storytellers do have a certain amount of power that players don't. And as much as you can say, I can do this, we can also say we can do this too. So that is a thing. Blowing up the freehold is fine. The consequences probably are not. So here's another thing. If you blow up a freehold in the service of the game and it makes the game fun for everybody, then I totally let you blow up the freehold. Like, that's great. Go for it. And when I say fun for everybody, it doesn't necessarily have to be fun in the moment. And not everybody has to agree on whether it was good. I just mean that if in general it has elevated the game, then by all means go for it. If you blow up the freehold because you think it would be funny and you don't really have much of a justification for it other than I thought out of character that it would be funny, it'll fail. It just will. And you'll probably have to have a conversation with us about what's appropriate in the context of game. In much the same way that if you create a character and the first day that your character exists on the server, they turn around and they kill another PC, I'm going to have questions as to why that happened. And if I don't like the answers, I will retcon it. Because I have encountered players like this, players who just want to watch the world burn. And while that happens in real life, it doesn't have to happen in the game that I happen to be part of running. If it doesn't serve the game, it won't stand, I guess is the way to put it. But we're not going to use that, willy-nilly, right? Bad things might happen to your character. You might fail a roll and your character doesn't get what they want. You might enter into a duel with somebody which you expect that you should win handily, and then you lose. And that might not feel great. But that's not making the game worse. That's chance kind of messing you up a little bit. And that's okay. So when I say make the game, you have to act. We make everybody, by the way, who plays in this game has to swear a very specific oath. It is something that I ask during character sanctioning. Every single person who has done so has had to swear, I swear that I shall do my best to make this game fun for everyone, not just for myself, or may the dreaming fry my Discord connection, and we hold people to that. We also recognize that this is not always possible for you to accommodate every single person because we have so many people. That's fine. The point is we want you to be a net positive on the game itself. So, Ellie Spot asks, any directions on how we can reference Changeling the streaming characters to the extent that they are public crosses shadow figures? I mean, you can definitely have heard of them. If you have, like, if you're a newly crystallized Changeling, you probably haven't. You can have heard of them. You can have been at events that they might have been at. The only thing that you can't do is come into the game with a pre-existing relationship with one of them. And a pre-existing relationship includes, I have met you and have had a long conversation with you. We may decide that your character is known to an NPC. That happened today. Zeron has heard of Sir Percival. And that's not something that Kung Fu Fenris asked for. I did it. I have to hope that he was okay with it. But the question is, can you reference them? Yeah, you can know what you can reasonably expect somebody to know, a public figure to know, right? You definitely probably would know who Sophia is, because just even a few moments around the city and you'll talking to any kind of local Cathane and you can know, right? The actions of the Motley Ignite are a big deal. The existence of them and their deeds are a matter of public record to a certain degree. You kind of have to, like, if you're familiar enough with Changeling the streaming, you'll probably can make that call, and you can always ask a storyteller. The only thing you can't do is you can't kind of walk up and be like, oh yeah, Patches and I, we're great friends. We hang out a lot. Can't do that. You can't even necessarily assume that your character has met one of those characters. But you could have, for instance, attended the annex over at the Grand Best Inn and have seen Patches there and be aware that she is the one who designed it. That you can totally do. You can absolutely, because it's reasonable to assume that Patches has been at the annex, and it's reasonable to assume that you can find out who built it. So you can do that. It also kind of saves us a little bit of time. It can get pretty frustrating when you're like, do I have to ask somebody so that I can know this in game? In general, no. You can just know it. It's fine. It's okay. And a little fudging can happen here and there for the sake of ease of gameplay. So, can you claim to have had the naughties with Zeron? Yes. He may not like the fact that you are lying about him, though, and then you're going to have to be the one to deal with it. You can claim things. You can lie. Lying is fine. I'm just saying that you can't say this and then wonder aloud why, when this character comes in and says, have we met? And you're like, but we have. It's in my backstory. No, it's not. At any rate, folks, we're coming close to the end of the time. So is there any other really major question that somebody needs to ask right now? I'm going to give you like just a minute to throw that in there, because otherwise the stream is coming to an end. But what I can tell you is that tomorrow there's going to be a stream over on Elizabeth A. Neal's channel. It's at 6 p.m. Eastern. Saturday, there will be streams. I think there's still streams. I think there might still be Drew Crew and Doomed, but I'm not certain of that. Sunday, ExalTwitch Academy episode 9 is coming up. That'll be a lot of fun. And then, of course, we've been discussing it all day today. Disconcordia. Join our Discord, and you'll find a link to there. And you'll be able to see for yourself. You can play. Have you played Changeling before? No? It's fine. Join in. You'll learn a lot along the way, and all that we ask is that you do your basic homework when it comes to learning how the game works. But trust me, people have read like 20 pages of that book and they managed to come in and play properly. So by all means, come on in. It'll be tons of fun. Special thanks, of course, to anybody today who contributed to their hype train or even afterwards, the bits. Kung Fu Fenders, thanks for holding that Dieclave high. And Crosshair, also here. It's good to see you. It's been a while since I've seen you in a stream, and I'm really happy that this worked out for you, and I'm hoping that you will feel better soon. Otherwise, I think that's it. Don't forget, in the end, you can always play. The difficulty comes in perhaps knowing how to play well or play best. And the best way to do that, not the easiest, but often the best, is to use your word hole. See you next time.